Welcome everyone. The webinar will begin shortly and will be recorded. Connect with the campaign for grade level reading on social media. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account at Reading by Third. Please use hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learned from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to retweet. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. Once again, we would love to connect. So on Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account at Reading by Third. The webinar will begin shortly. It will be recorded and shared with you afterwards. Okay, once again, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sierra Sanchez, and I will be behind the scenes helping to produce this conversation. I have just a few housekeeping details before we get started. First, we would love for you to introduce yourself, so please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city or state, and your organization. Be sure when responding to select both panelists and attendees so that we all know who is here. All attendees are in listen-only mode, but we encourage your engagement by posting questions in the Q&A box. We will dedicate the last portion of the conversation to respond to the questions you post. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be emailed on Friday to all who registered. And we are streaming the webinar on Facebook Live. All resources that you see shared as links in the chat will be compiled and shared in a follow-up email to all webinar registrants. And materials are accessible on GLR's Community Learning for Impact and Improvement platform, aka CLIP. Finally, we'll be posting a brief on-screen evaluation during Q&A and highly encourage you to respond. This helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. Finally, before we start, I would just like to call your attention to our upcoming GLR Learning Tuesdays webinars. Next week on October 19th, we have an exciting doubleheader, starting with a funder-to-funder conversation on New Jersey tutoring course, lessons in accelerating learning recovery, and then a 3 p.m. session on filling gaps ASAP, unlocking the potential of substitute teaching. In addition, we invite you to join us at 3 p.m. to round off October with a session on co-generational solutions, older and younger changemakers innovating together. Lastly, on November 2nd, we invite you to join us for 2 rich sessions focused on building a parent nation at 12:30 Eastern Time and learning at home and in the classroom, innovation in curricula and professional learning. More information and registration for these opportunities will be posted in the chat box. Joining you now is Sarah Torian, Senior Consultant for the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Sarah, and welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us for today's GLR Learning Tuesday session entitled Learning at Home and at School, Public Media Education Partnerships, a session co-sponsored and co-hosted by Public Broadcasting Service. So this is not the back to school season that I think many of us, including myself, were looking forward to last spring as vaccination rates were increasing and case rates were falling. This fall instead, school systems continue to navigate the challenges posed by the pandemic with a focus on keeping kids learning and keeping students and staff safe and healthy during the pandemic. As we face these challenges, PBS member stations remain an important and vital partner for local and regional education partners, providing supplementary learning content and resources to support learning both at home and in the classroom. We're excited to have several public media education partners join us today and share exactly how they are working together, how they came together, the initiatives they're doing, and what they're learning through that process. And to begin that conversation, I am honored to welcome and introduce Jennifer English, who will moderate and lead today's conversation. Jen is Senior Director of Strategy and Partnerships for Children's Media and Education at PBS. She's responsible for PBS Kids National Partnership Development and leads strategic initiatives designed to build PBS's organizational capacity and impact in early learning and education. Welcome, Jen, and thank you so much for helping to plan this conversation and leading us through it during the rest of the session. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. It's great to be here with everyone for another GLR Learning Tuesday. Exciting to see so many of our friends in the chat box, those who I know are with PBS member stations, and also many who I know are working with member stations in their local communities. As those of you who are here probably recall from the invitation, during today's session, we'll be exploring the ways in which PBS member stations have been working with local education partners to develop and deliver programming and resources to help meet the needs of students. Just over lunch today, I flipped to the Washington Post website and I saw a headline which read, "Across America, students are back in school. It's working, but it's weird." And really, it is. Without a doubt, the education environment over the last 19 months has been an extraordinary challenge. Schools, educators, students, and families have experienced some or all of a variety of unprecedented events, long periods of learning from home, uncertain returns to the classroom, intermittent disruptions to schooling due to illness or exposures to illness, and the challenge of supporting, restarting, or recovering learning with the goal of achieving desired educational outcomes. And some have felt the cost of disruption much more keenly than others. PBS itself has a long history in education with a lifelong commitment to providing universal, free access to education to learners of all kinds. Many PBS member stations, some that are here today, were founded as educational radio broadcasters back in the 1930s and 1940s. And over the years, public media has provided all kinds of educational services, including distance instruction, professional learning, early childhood educational programming and services, as well as hours of local educational media content and resources featuring local history, geography, arts, science, and more. In the 50 years since PBS was founded, it has evolved along with technology, and PBS educational content now spans beyond televised programming into thousands of free resources, including digital learning games and apps, digital video series and shorts, podcasts, interactive lessons, and many other classroom instructional resources available through PBS's repository of educator resources at PBS Learning Media. And I think Sarah will drop a link to that for those of you who have not accessed that repository. I would highly recommend it. As a result of PBS's foundation on education and sort of this foundational focus on education, including that commitment to providing free, accessible educational media and learning resources, both nationally and at the local level, public television was really primed to pivot our efforts to support our partners in education during the pandemic. And last March, as schools prepared to shift to remote learning, PBS, its member stations, and our national partners worked together to provide content and resources which could help school systems fill identified local needs. I looked back, beginning on March 17th, which seems so long ago, PBS member stations began broadcasting what became hundreds of hours of deliberately curated content linked to standards aligned classroom resources. Additionally, stations and their partners were able to tap analog learning supports to extend learning to children in low to no connectivity homes. Professional learning was provided to help educators quickly leverage digital and broadcast connected learning resources, and local stations worked with state and local education systems to identify and deploy unique content and resource solutions for their own communities. And if you look across public media, you can check out some of their websites and really see how varied those responses have been. In addition to these efforts focused on school-age children, PBS and member stations also reached out to millions of parents and caregivers of pre-K children, connecting them to learn at home resources to support those youngest learners as their learning and care scenarios were also significantly disrupted. As the pandemic continued and school systems refined and adapted their approaches, relationships between local educational organizations and PBS member stations have grown and evolved. During this time, collaborative projects have been evaluated, refined, and adapted to keep pace with the needs and habits of teachers, students, and parents. Today, we'll hear about 3 locally designed and executed projects and gain insights into the ways public media can be an active and effective partner in addressing local needs and supporting educational equity. So joining us today, and we'll flip to the slides, I think, as we go through this, are Sajni Kumpuris, Director of Education, and Elizabeth Rollins, Manager of Curriculum and Instruction for Arkansas PBS, who have spearheaded their station's work with the Arkansas Department of Education and educators from across their state. Beginning in spring of 2020, the Arkansas PBS team created distance instruction programming tied to State Department of Ed learning targets. Those efforts were refined and extended into programming and outreach for the summer months to help children who needed supplemental learning experiences to support their pandemic recovery. We'll hear more about that program in a few moments. We're also joined today by Jillian Reen Gainsley, Program Director for the Michigan Learning Channel, and Susan Townsend, Project Director for Literacy for the Michigan Association of Intermediate School Administrators, who have been partnering to develop and leverage the newly created Michigan Learning Channel, which is a collaboration between 7 local public media stations in the state of Michigan. Working together, they've identified areas where Michigan's public television stations can provide supplementary resources to help educators and children in areas of particular curricular importance. And today we'll hear about one of those projects. Finally, we're joined by Janice Fold, Associate Education Director with the WNET Group in New York, and Andrew Fletcher, Senior Executive Director for Early Literacy with the New York City Department of Education, whose organizations came together in a project designed to provide supplemental support for early literacy, the project called Let's Learn. As you'll hear, the Let's Learn project began as a highly targeted local initiative to support New York City schools and New York students, but has grown to include a nationally relevant content as well. So with those introductions in place, we'll start the session with a quick overview of each of the 3 projects. After that, I'll facilitate an open conversation with the 6 panelists. During the session, please feel free to submit any questions. We will work to sort of compile them and include them throughout our discussion. And as I mentioned, this CLR team will be also dropping links to resources that you might want to access after today's session. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Sajni and Elizabeth so they can talk about their project.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And it's a pleasure to be with all of you. So yes, for over a decade, Arkansas PBS has had a very deep partnership with the State Department of Education to provide teacher professional development for K through 12 teachers. And for that effort, we serve over 76,000 users and have a collection of over 700 courses, so PD courses. And so due to this partnership, when schools closed due to the pandemic, we reached out to them and asked them, what can we do to help? And from that, we put on Arkansas AMI, which was academic focused programming for 5 days a week, 5 hours a day for 8 weeks. And so fast forward a year later, the Department of Ed received federal funding to combat learning loss. So they reached out to us this time and said, how could we help them, deal with the learning loss that may have occurred in this very non-traditional year for students. And so that was the birth of Rise and Shine Summer Learning. And we can go to the next slide. And so, the first phase that we had to accomplish was to understand what the need was and create a solution utilizing public television. And we knew it was important that we couldn't compromise academic standards. So we asked for those from the Department of Ed, and they picked ones in literacy, math, social studies, and science. So we took that and had licensed teachers on staff and also hired more to understand what those standards would be and how we produce programming for it. The second thing that was equally as important is we had to understand the students were not in the classroom. They were everywhere, whether it was a summer camp or at home or, at daycare. So we really looked at that and said, how do we reach them with this high quality content? And so we spent a lot of time figuring out where they were. And so also from the success of Arkansas AMI, we had 6 of the Teachers of the Year from Arkansas on that program. So we brought them back. They were amazing, cream of the crop teachers. They knew how to be engaging on camera. And so they all came back to do this program, and they all took one of the subjects. So what happened is we had 3.5 hours a day, 5 days a week for 6 weeks of Rise and Shine. And Liz is going to tell you a little bit more about the program.
And on the next slide, we'll talk about what was created. So it was more than 100 hours of instruction, more than 100 locally produced lessons and core subjects. We folded in National PBS Kids programming into the lineup too. Over, 15 original songs, series of digital shorts, video segments featuring local children's book authors read their books being read, and 32 virtual field trips to organizations across the state, like the zoo and the diamond mine and things like that. So in all of this, literacy was our biggest focus. We had, out of all the videos from the core subjects, literacy had the most, and they were the longest at 5 minutes each. A lot of the other ones were only 3.5 minutes each. And so we pulled in, one of the teachers of the year is a kindergarten teacher, and so she did all the literacy lessons, Randy House from Conway, Arkansas, and so she was trained in the science of reading and would go into lessons on closed syllables, open syllables, vowels. She would read books, and she'd talk about character traits, all these different small little 5-minute lessons. So what we did was we developed this with a team of educators on staff, and then we hired additional educators to come in, and we worked with her on when she would go into each different standard that the Department of Ed wanted us to go into. And so she developed her lesson plans for the video lessons. And then at the same time, if you can go to the next slide, at the same time, we were working on creating an activity booklet. So this was a 6-week program. So we had one 28-page bilingual booklet per week that we created to extend the learning of the video lessons that were broadcast. And so these were distributed to over 53,000 students across the state. We were able to get them out to 74 of the 75 counties in Arkansas. And so these activity booklets would go out to both organizations across the state and also the students' homes. We had over 1,000 parents and grandparents request through a form on the site, request the activity booklets, power packets. And so that's what we created. And then on the next slide, so this is, and it's in the chat too, these, the web address, everything's, you can watch it on the video app, but we've got one video queued up so you can see an example.
I'm Randy House, and I'm a kindergarten teacher from right here in Arkansas. And today, we're going to be learning about how to make a delicious, a yummy, a strawberry banana smoothie.
Smoothie?
Frisbee, what are you doing here?
I heard you said smoothie, Miss House.
Oh, Frisbee, I'm so sorry. Miss House was making a joke. We're not really making a smoothie. We're making blends today.
What's a blend?
A blend is when you take two things and you put them together. Like a smoothie is when you take two kinds of fruit, like bananas and strawberries, and you blend them together to make one delicious, yummy drink. But like I said, we're not actually making smoothies. We're making blends. So I'm taking two letters and putting them together to make a new, yummy, delicious blend. First, Frisbee, I'm starting with a B and an L. Do you know what sound a B makes?
B.
Perfect. Can you make a blender sound?
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. Out pops my B and L, which makes a bl. Can you say that sound?
Blah.
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 Bleh.
Blah.
Yeah, I love it. Bleh. Like blag and blog. Let's try another one. Let's try my S and an L. I'm going to put them in my blender. All right, Frisbee, here we go. Out pops S and an L, and it makes the sound of sl.
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 Like slip and slap.
Slobber.
Oh, did you slobber on me again, Frisbee? What did
I'm
we
sorry.
say about that? All right, let's try one more. Let's
Okay.
do an S and a T, and let's blend it. Out pops ST, which makes st.
St.
St. Like the word stick.
Stick.
I said
You got
stick.
one?
Oh no, I don't have a stick. I got a pencil. Does this work?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, we're gonna do it.
Where'd it go?
A blend is when you take two letters, you blend them all up, and they make a yummy new blend where you can hear both of their sounds. Thank you, Frisbee, for all your help today. I'm so glad you got your. He just blew his stick on the table.
There's a number 2. I prefer
Number
number 1.
Thank you, Sajni and Elizabeth. Now we'll hand it over to Susan and Jillian, who will talk about the work that they're doing with Michigan Learning Channel.
Thanks so much. It's fun to see everyone else's videos. Do we have the slideshow? There we go. So hi folks, I'm Jillian Gainsley from the Detroit Public Television, and we launched the Michigan Learning Channel. So we actually launched the channel, a statewide 24/7 channel in response to the pandemic and also for continued student learning in Michigan across the entire state. But today we're going to focus specifically on the literacy program that we created for that channel. It is called Read, Write, Roar, and it's a K-3 literacy series. We really felt that it was important to have grade leveled instruction, and we're hearing from educators across the state that it was really critical to stay very closely aligned to the standards and to also have really specific grade level instruction so that a student was not not missing out on the instruction that we were hoping that they would be able to get in each grade. And so we were very excited to share this. Next slide, please. So the Michigan Learning Channel is hosted out of Detroit Public Television, but it is actually a partnership between all 6 PBS member stations in the state of Michigan. So we were able to get statewide coverage by partnering with all of the PBS member stations across the state. And it was really the first time that those stations worked together in a significant way to, to serve and be able to share on a statewide basis. One of the other things that's really, I think, unique and exciting about this, the Michigan Learning Channel, is that each of those stations has an engagement coordinator. So we have the content that's coming on the channel, but a lot of the work that we're doing is also that direct engagement with teachers, parents, libraries, different organizations on the ground in each of those districts. And so we divided up the state, and each one has a dedicated staff member who's focused on, going to literacy nights and talking to parents and, answering questions on Facebook and building partnerships with local museums and libraries. So it's really been an exciting model for you have the content, but then you also need to have the people who are ready to engage it and make sure that people know where it is and how to find it. Next slide, please. So to tell the story about how the Michigan Learning Channel and specifically how Read, Write, Roar came to be, I thought I'd share a timeline. The font is small, but I'll explain a little bit. So of course, like everyone in March of 2020 in Michigan, it was Friday the 13th of March that was the first day that school shut down. And so we immediately, I remember emailing my boss and saying, could we put school on TV? I know that sounds a little crazy, but I think it might work. And she said, oh, we're already thinking about that. Come on, let's have a conversation. So we actually started not by school on TV. We did air some of the PBS schedule, but we really started with a daily conversation with school staff. And we had administrators and teachers, and we're listening to what they needed, what their main concerns were. We started with a newsletter and by sharing a lot of the PBS and PBS Kids resources. But then it became pretty clear very quickly that having direct instruction that was available over the airways was going to be really valuable in Michigan. There were a lot of students about a third of Michigan students don't have any internet access at home. A number of other students on top of that might have internet access, but not have enough devices in the family. And then of course there's technical barriers, technical knowledge, and it's much easier to turn on a TV than to figure out how to get on a Zoom call. And so we really heard loud and clear that we needed a way to overcome that barrier. And so PBS and this existing infrastructure with TV became part of the answer. we were able to connect with Mesa, and we're a little different from some of the other stations where we didn't have a natural, we were already linked up with our Department of Education. The Michigan Department of Education was really, really supportive of this activity, but they weren't able to be that partner. And so we were able to connect with Mesa, who really lead the literacy and instructional coaching work around the state. And they were just the perfect partner to launch some of this literacy work. So when we got our funding in September, we launched a pilot in Detroit in November. We launched statewide the channel in January. And with Mesa, we worked together. We actually vetted content from across the entire PBS system and chose another show from Rocky Mountain PBS to be our first show as we worked to develop our own. So in April, we launched Read, Write, Roar. And then similar to our friends in Arkansas, we did a huge push over the summer. I don't know if you can see in my little screen here, but we distributed 30,000 of these activity books across the state at summer food sites. And we are actually still making Read, Write, Roar. Our goal is to make an entire academic year worth of content. And so we have new episodes that are going to be aligned to what is being taught in school at that time that are going to premiere on November 15th. And I think next we're going to show you a little bit of the show.
Today, we're going to build a word ladder. We're going to start at the bottom, and then we're going to change just one letter in the word. Just like a ladder, we're going to start at the bottom and make our way all the way to the top. Make sure you have something to write with so you can write with us.
The Michigan Learning Channel is excited to bring a new English language arts program, Read, Write, Roar, to your kindergarten through third grade learners.
The first word we're going to write is the word cup. I like to drink milk from a cup. Let's listen for the sounds in the word cup. Cup. Let's write that word at the bottom of our ladder. Cup. I like to take my finger and check to make sure I spelled it the right way. Cup. Good.
Focusing on building literacy skills through phonics, word building, read alouds, and writing exercises. These standard-aligned lessons will be taught by local Michigan teachers.
Hello, amazing learners. Welcome back to Read, Write, Roar. My name is Miss Rogers, and we're going to be reading a book about the invisible boy. But before we do that, have you ever felt invisible? Well, we're going to take a look into this story and see what happens to a little boy who felt that way. I want you to pay very close attention to the illustrations. If you notice, the little boy starts off with just being two colors, black and white. But everything around him and even his friends, they're full of color like what you see behind me. So pay close attention and notice when he changes color, if he changes color, and what happens to cause those things to occur in the story. Are you ready? Let's begin.
Watch Read, Write, Roar on the Michigan Learning Channel or online at michiganlearning.org.
But of course, just having a series wasn't enough. We also really saw an opportunity to turn it into a professional learning series. And I'm going to ask Susan to talk a little bit about that.
Hi, everyone. As Jillian said, we really wanted to take our work and turn it into a professional learning series. We wanted to double down and include professional learning for our statewide educators. And our goal was really to connect as many educators to this programming that is aligned to our research-supported essential instructional practices and literacy that are utilized across our state in our statewide network. We've been very fortunate to work with the Detroit Public Television channel and work with them to create Read, Write, Roar because it has really gained attention and awareness about certain literacy skills that we want to utilize statewide. So again, we're offering professional learning, utilizing our coaches and our teachers across the state. And we've had one session so far, and you can already see that we had 82 teachers attend the first session in the middle of September, right when they started school. And we had 20 counties across our state represented, and we're offering another one. And the list is just continuing to grow because people are excited about this work. And it's really helping them, all our educators and our teachers, really make connections to our statewide initiative around literacy, and also apply these practices into their classroom, which we know ultimately, because we're utilizing research supported practices, that it will help with literacy achievement for our students. And again, we thank you and want you to check out Michigan Learning Channel and also literacyessentials.org to learn more from us.
Thank you so much, Jillian and Susan. And now for our last of our three sort of example partnerships, I'm passing the microphone over to Janice and Andrew, who will talk about their project in New York.
Hi, everyone. I'm Janice Fold of the WNET group in New York, and I'm really happy to be joined by Andrew Fletcher, who is our partner in crime at the NYC Department of Education. And this was really a collaborative effort between our two organizations. At the beginning of the pandemic, like our other colleagues in Michigan and Arkansas, where we were really looking for ways to reach our audiences in new and innovative ways, and really to provide equitable access to our audiences. And especially, we really wanted to reach families who had limited or no internet access, or didn't have reliable internet access. And we know that our broadcast channels are in about 99% of all households in our area. And so we knew that that was the way to go. And at the same time, the DOE, the New York City DOE, was also looking at ways to provide access to their youngest learners. And so they reached out to us and really wanted to create a show for kids pre-K through grades 2, and with a strong focus in literacy, and also featuring other subject areas like math and science and music. And so Let's Learn was born, which is a series geared for kids ages 3 to 8. And rather than me just telling you about it, we're going to show you. So here's a little promo from the show.
Let's share a story.
We are going to read a book to you.
Let's have fun with words.
Water.
Let's have fun with numbers.
I'm going to add 3 and 3 to make 6.
Let's discover science.
I think I know what.
Let's make music.
Here we go.
Let's learn.
Catchy theme song, right? So that's just a little overview of Let's Learn, and maybe we can go to our next slide. So far to date, we've created 140 one-hour episodes, and we have over 700 segments that are organized by subject. And one good tip I wanted to share with all of you, if you see these icons on the right here, these are all the different topic areas of the different subjects, like Let's Build, Let's Read and Write, and all the different topic areas. If you go to our website, which the link is in the chat, and you click on one of those areas, you can see all the segments. So if you just want to focus on read alouds, you can watch all the read alouds. Or if you want to just focus on music, you can watch all the music segments. And you can also access all of the episodes free online as well. So that's a really nice thing, that all the segments and video episodes are accessible. And they're all the segments and all the episodes are led by educational coaches and teachers. And at the beginning of the pandemic, everything was done from their homes. And a lot of them you can see did it solo, and some of them included their kids in the episodes as well, which I think really made it relatable for a lot of our families who were, especially at the beginning, all at home in the same space. And as Jen said before, it started out as a New York City focused program. And then because of the interest nationally in this kind of programming, we now have changed it from Let's Learn NYC when it started to Let's Learn, and it now has national reach. And I want to pass the mic over to Andrew, and he can tell a little bit more about the educational framework of the show.
Thanks, Janice. In a moment in the chat, you'll see a link to our educational framework, sort of a mini white paper on the show and what we're doing, the why, and really how behind it all. You heard Janice talk about the wide range of ages we are targeting and grades. And so I like to give sort of a disclaimer because we're trying to be a lot of things to a lot of people. To do that, I paraphrase Catherine Snow out of Harvard, who's an expert on language and literacy development in children. And she says that teaching that we're showing here, the teaching that is taking place is helpful for all children, harmful for none, and crucial for some. So we think of it as introductory material for particular children, reinforcement for others, and enrichment at the same time. And it just, of course, depends on where the students are who are watching the show. As Janice also talked about, we're covering a wide variety of subject areas in the show, but we'll focus on literacy today. It was important for the connection with New York City and our Universal Literacy Initiative, which strives to ensure that all of our children are reading at grade level by the time they complete second grade, that literacy was present in every episode. So every episode has a foundational reading skills segment, along with a story time or read aloud segment. These lessons, both the foundational reading and the read alouds, are grounded in the science of reading. We make sure that the big five, phonological and phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension, are there between the two lessons, and of course, writing as well. Over the course of the pandemic, we designed Let's Learn to be a supplement to the remote learning that was already happening in New York City schools. And one of the curricula in use was Houghton Mifflin Harcourt's Into Reading. So to just satisfy a number of needs, we use their scope and sequence to inform the lessons that we designed. And those lesson plans actually can be found on PBS Learning Media, which we'll talk more about in a moment. So it's really one-stop shopping for teachers to use these materials as resources, and of course for families. In the different segments, teachers introduce, they practice, they review particular skills, and we attempted to have this work done over multiple lessons with the hopes that children were tuning in day after day in order to mirror what would be happening in their regular classrooms. We've got another clip to show you. In this clip, we've got Universal Literacy reading coach Vida Nazimian and her son Tomio. And Vida is teaching us about compound words, which can be used with readers to see their particular level of awareness when it comes to the sounds of language. And compound words are quite nice in that way. They show us how easily or not we have that awareness. So let's watch Vida and Tomio.
Do you know what a compound word is?
I do.
You do? What's a compound word, Tomio?
It's a word, but there's another word that joins it, like cake. Okay, so cup, like
Cup.
cup,
And what's the other word that joins it?
cake,
And what's the word they make together?
cupcake.
Very good, Tomio. Let's try another one together. Ready?
So we encouraged our Universal Literacy reading coaches and the other educators involved to involve their own children and pets. We didn't have puppets. I love the Michigan puppet, by the way. So that's something maybe we can build into future episodes. So that's a bit of our educational framework. And again, you can access the link in the chat for more on that. Next, we wanted to talk about flexible use and how we've wanted to build that into everything we've done with Let's Learn. The initial impetus for Let's Learn was to make sure that families could access instruction with a device that's in over 99% of our homes here in New York City, and that's their television. So just having this air on broadcast was a huge piece for us that we were able to make happen with WNET. But at the same time, there was digital access. There's an entire website that was built, letslearn.org. And at first, only our episodes were available. But over the course of the year, we were able to break episodes into segments. And we'll talk more about that. And that was a real game changer for the most flexible use possible. We wanted to make sure that Let's Learn could be used in any setting, formal or informal. We think we've done that. It can be used, like I talked about earlier, for remote instruction, but also hybrid. For live or in-person instruction. This could be something that teachers show as a part of their lesson delivery. It could be provided for asynchronous viewing at a later time, for whole classes, for small groups. Like I talked about at the start with my quote from, or my paraphrase from Catherine Snow, the lessons themselves do a number of different things. They could be reteaches for students who need that, or where we pre-teach a particular skill. Again, I think the sky's the limit as to how these segments get used. We wanted them also to be models of best practice. Our coaches showing families how best to work with their children to enhance the literacy development already happening at home. We wanted to make sure that we weren't coming from any sort of deficit mindset where things weren't happening at home. This was meant to supplement that work, supplement what was happening in the classroom. And really, a pulling of the curtain. I think we saw that across the pandemic. I think we could all probably talk about that, where for maybe the first time, as opposed to a parent-teacher conference or just a visit to school, families really got to see what was going on in classrooms on a regular basis. The mystery was gone. And we wanted to take advantage of that to show families what good literacy instruction and assessment look like. And as I talked about before, the lesson plans that go along with our segments on PBS Learning Media are a great tool for lesson planning and just designing instruction.
Thanks, Andrew. And we recommend that you check out our suite of Let's Learn resources on PBS Learning Media, because we have a robust suite of Let's Learn resources on PBS Learning Media. And just finally, to wrap up, we just wanted to talk about some of the feedback we've gotten from the show. And we have gotten feedback via a survey that's on the Let's Learn website. And we also had researchers conduct a study for us where families watched 3 episodes at home and then gave us feedback. And we got some really interesting results from the survey as well as the study. And what we found is that from watching the episodes, that there were really tangible learning outcomes. So, for example, parents said that their kids were sounding out words, that they were learning how to divide words into syllables, that they were recognizing letters. And this was directly related to what was featured on the show. And an interesting finding that we found is that parents, Andrew was talking about the whole modeling, that we wanted to model effective practice, that parents learn different practices to incorporate into their reading with their kids. So for example, that they learned that it was great to be more enthusiastic when reading, and that to ask questions, that they used a lot of the strategies that they saw on the show. And they also mentioned that they learned some terms like the word digraph that they hadn't known before, and were able to, it helped them better understand what was going on with their kids' learning. And then one thing we found is that Parents and educators really appreciated having this during the pandemic, but also felt that it would be very helpful beyond the pandemic as well. And so our next steps, just actually on October 4th, launched a new after-school instructional programming block, After School Superstars, and Let's Learn is one of the key programs that anchoring that block. We also have 20 new episodes that we're planning to create for Let's Learn, and we're hoping to planning to make our Let's Learn website more searchable and easier to access so that families and whoever educators can just come and really find the segments that they want very easily. And we're planning to do more outreach to high needs communities. So those are our plans. And Andrew, anything else I forgot?
No, I think that covers it. Thanks, Janice. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Back to you, Jen.
Thank you, Janice and Andrew. Every time I see that cupcake video, it makes me smile every time. So I've seen it several times now, and it's just so charming, right? So I wanted to now flip to sort of our full panel. So I don't know if everyone who's on the panel can sort of put on your cameras, and we'll go ahead and get started opening the roundtable discussion. We have some sort of areas of question opened up, but we're also here to answer your questions. So as we go through the process, if you can kind of pop them in, if anything that we're discussing brings up a question for you. I know we have a lot of public media people in the audience, so you might want to sort of offer your insights as well, or local educational organizations that have been working with public media. You might want to offer some of your insights as well, because I think the key value for these types of events is really the cross learning that we can do, and the tips and ideas we can bring back to our own communities. So let's get this rolling. I know we talked sort of, a lot of you, when you were doing your presentations, talked about sort of the impetus to the projects that you did. And I wanted to take a moment to sort of dive back into that a little bit and ask sort of the kinds of questions you asked yourselves in order to really identify and refine the projects before you got started, so you could really make sure you were smartly deploying your resources. I know in Michigan, you all talked about sort of this process of educator feedback and input, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about sort of what that process looked like in case other people want to try and engage in that.
Sure. Yeah, I think that it's important that we really started, and Detroit Public TV had good relationships with a lot of educators pre-pandemic, and was doing a lot on the ground, particularly in pre-K. This was moving into K-12 was a different world in a lot of ways, but we were able to bring together a group of folks that we had worked with for a very long time, and really it was amazing to me that we had a daily call every day at lunchtime. And it was amazing to me that everyone came over and over again to this call and was really eager to share with each other how they were responding in those really early days of the pandemic. But also, we were able to convene that and ask folks what they needed, how we could be helpful. And particularly, we also did a lot of like news messaging, just trying to get the word out to students about what was happening in schools. But that turned into us gaining a lot of insights into what educators were looking for and what kind of content they thought would be helpful. And so it was interesting too to see, we do air what Let's Learn on the channel. It was interesting to hear WNET sharing a lot of the same strategies and the same insights, and it was very interesting that we came to a lot of the same conclusions in terms of how materials would be used, that it was really important to have them aligned to standards, and it was very important to have them just as widely accessible to parents as possible, and really that parent engagement piece was critical.
Yeah, I know a lot of you started with state standards. I know we talked about this in our group, and obviously with the New York project, you were working off of your standards for the New York City schools. Can you talk a little bit about sort of how you refined and tried to simplify? Because I know there's an enormous amount of content, or the curriculum's big, right, that you're trying to cover, but these media can be very focused. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you sort of narrowed down on the topics or the content that you would work through.
For us here in New York City, Jen? Yeah. So because of that pre-K to grade 2 continuum, really just thought about in a year's time, what could we start with that was maybe kindergarten-ish, to make up a word, and to go through the year where we would end maybe in early 2nd grade, knowing that none of it would be enough, but it would be something that again could go along with what children were doing in their school. But it was hard. It's difficult in a 12 to 13-minute segment, and just 140 of them to cover everything you would need in terms of learning to read. That's a complex topic that takes years. So we were under no illusion that that would be easy, and did our best to try and hit major topics and to have a lot of practice built in, so we could feel comfortable that your average student and reader would be able to take something out of what we did.
And Sajni and Elizabeth, I know you worked with your State Department of Education. They provided sort of learning targets, and then you worked to refine with them what the approach would be. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Sure. So we knew that to put this on public television, we needed to have a format. So we needed to have a literacy moment where they knew this teacher was going to come on and they could anticipate that. We knew to separate K through 2 and then do 3 through 5. So, if they were in the K through 2 level, they could watch maybe the first hour and a half and move on, but they kind of separated and had a very distinct spot in that 3.5 hours. So, you knew when Randy House was coming on, when Joel Lukadu was coming on, and what they would cover. So parents could really say, you know what, they need help in this area. We're going to watch this part of the programming, or they could watch it all. They had that choice. Another thing that we were it was important to us is that everything we provided was to ensure that parents felt comfortable with the content. They understood what we were doing, that it was supplemental, that it was going to be enduring material. So if you didn't make it and watch it, we were going to have it available to you somewhere else. And then we just brought things to where they're at. So we didn't necessarily say the public media, the television part is the most important. We said it's all important, and we're going to meet you where you're going in the day with your kids, and we'll find one method of getting to you and the content, whether it was print materials or the digital series or anything else. So yeah, we just very much wanted them, it's like, when your favorite program comes on, and we wanted them to have a very formatted method of getting this and knowing what they would cover. So a lot of kids just loved the math segments. They knew from our scheduling when that would come up and when they could watch it, and parents could too. So we just made sure we produced it in a way that it would be enduring, and that it matters to a kindergartner, the 2nd grader that they are 2 years later. They can use that then for the things that they need to cover. It has no shelf life in the way we produced it. It's very intentional to do that, so it didn't just last through the summer.
Our Arkansas Department of Ed had talked to all the different districts and gotten feedback on where they thought they needed more help too. So we had those, what they call it? They called it a back to school playbook, and we they told us focus on those standards that are in there, and then also they gave us some additional ones. They really wanted us to focus on encoding and decoding, and we, like Sashi said, we tried to focus on making it enduring, and we don't have them on PDF learning media yet, but they will be.
Great, thank you. I know one of the things we also talked about when we had our pre-meeting was sort of sorting out what assets everyone has to bring to the table and how you're going to construct the projects based on the assets you had. There was I know, Jillian, when we were talking about the Michigan Learning Channel, you all don't have a deep education team working on the channel. And for those of you who are in public media, you know that different PBS member stations have varying size education teams. Some have rather large and robust teams, some have pretty slim teams. And so the Michigan Learning Channel recognized that they didn't have a particularly deep team, and so solved that through their partnership. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, and I'll let Susan chime in too. But Georgianne, who's my colleague, and we're really leading the development of the channel, and we started to go into every conversation by saying, I'm not an educator. We're here to put you folks on TV. We're here to defer to your expertise and to let you drive what's going to be on this channel, because it needed to be driven by educators. And we also had a lot of challenges in Michigan because we don't have a unified state curriculum. We have 850 different school districts that all make their own decisions. And so it's very difficult to find, there's not a common, other than the Common Core state standards, there's not a common thread or curriculum that people are using. And so really, Susan and MAISA came to our rescue. And when we started talking to each other, it was very clear very quickly that they had the statewide network and the statewide information that we needed. So it was just a great, miraculous match almost to be able to, highlight them.
I think we were lucky because, as Jillian said, they didn't have the educators on staff, but we didn't have producers. But what we did have was a statewide network of coaches that support all the districts across the state. And our organization has a set of practices that we've established collectively across our state that are our focus, which align with our Michigan state standards, but also go a little bit deeper into the research supported initiatives that we should be doing collectively across the state. So to get that information out and planned, we utilized our coaches to help build the lessons, build the content, provide feedback, and then we utilized our ISDs to help get that word and funnel it down to the classroom level with the direction of our partnership with the Michigan Learning Channel. And it's spreading like wildfire. So it's been a really great partnership. And I've learned a lot about production, and they've learned a lot about education.
Thanks. We have a question here too that relates sort of to project assets and participant assets, which is specifically about how the availability for Let's Learn is being communicated to New York City or New York State's families, and whether or not there's outreach to early childhood centers. So I'll leave that for you all to answer and then follow up with Arkansas, because I know they did a lot of community partner outreach. So Andrew and Janice, do you want to talk about Let's Learn first and then?
Sure. So we do our best to make sure throughout our system that folks are aware of the resource. We did a good amount of press and just communicating last year. School started later this year, and you might have heard on the news the vaccination mandate situation going on in New York City and the corresponding issues with teacher vacancies and such. So we're a bit waylaid by that, but the plan is to continue that communicating, because the resource is only valuable if folks know about it. And even if you used it last year, we want to make sure that our families and schools know that it's still available. We're housed, or I should say, I am housed within our Division of Early Childhood Education. So any early childhood center throughout the city where they're specifically a district or part of a district school or connected to a community-based organization, you'll be getting that information if you haven't already. So we'll make sure that does happen.
Great. And Sajna and Elizabeth, I don't know if you can talk a little bit about how you activated your network of community organizations.
Sure. So one of the things that we knew kids couldn't do in this state of the pandemic was to go on vacations like they normally do. So we, leveraged that, and we got field trips, virtual field trips, as a part of the learning. And so with that, we had all of these local, regional museums, zoo. They were all segments within our summer program. But what we also did is put those power packets in their hands. So now these power packets weren't coming from PBS, they were coming on a local level where the students were. And that also included, like Andrew said, the Boys and Girls Clubs, the places where kids were during the summer when they're not in the classroom. And so we really understood that we had to meet them where they're at. We had to find out what those places were in each part of the state. And if we didn't do that and reach out to them and make it accessible, so reach out to those folks and let them reach out because they're trusted in that area. We knew the reach would be much bigger and that they would come back. So for example, the food bank, we gave them 1,000 per week. They got 1,000 and they put them in the grocery bags for 33 counties of our state out of 75. And then, like I said, we did all the community outreach locations. And what that also did was get the news out in various ways from various people. So we were not the only ones sharing the news. They were sharing, we're going to be on PBS. We have these power packets for you. Come and get them. We'll bring them to you. And the last phase was there are people who are at home. They don't have good transportation. We're in a poor state. So we, for free, we allowed them to reach out to us and we mailed it to their door every week. They told us how many kids they had. We sent, manipulatives and pencils. We did not assume they had those things. So we gave them the tools to actually utilize. And some of the tools were things that they actually saw the Teachers of the Year do. And so now they get to extend that learning beyond what they saw that day. They can do it themselves with their families and their parents. So it was, like Liz said, we reached 74 out of 75 of our counties, and some of them do not get our signal. So we were really, really proud that we found a way to them regardless of that.
Yeah. And another thing that we've learned this through our PD courses, but also been through Arkansas AMI when the pandemic hit and now Rise and Shine, is whenever we get the Arkansas Teachers of the Year on to be the talent in the lessons for the kids, they're all from different schools across the state too. And then when we hired additional teachers to work with us, they're all from different schools too. So then that's also getting the word out to different school systems at the same time. So yeah, all the field trip partners and then all the teachers that were involved, all of that really helped with the networking of this.
Thanks. As we had a question that came in, and it sort of, I think, kind of leans into my next section of questions, which first, let's cover this question, which is, can New York expand on the primary grades content program design in Let's Learn? And also, they're wondering if the research data is available.
I can take the content program design. And actually, I was just looking for a link to that curriculum I mentioned, Hoot, Mifflin Harcourt's Into Reading. And of course, it's not working. So after I'm done answering, I will find it and put it into the chat. But it's your sort of basic comprehensive literacy program. And like I talked about earlier, we looked at the kindergarten through second grade curriculum and pieced things together in a scope and sequence we thought would work over the course of the 140 episodes. We have different segments. There's Let's Have Fun with Words, which focuses more on phonological and phonemic awareness and alphabetic knowledge. We also had a segment called Let's Read and Write, which was more phonics in terms of instruction, more phonics material. We had Let's Read and Write Together, which was sort of a hodgepodge. There were elements of all Big Five components and writing in a shared reading and writing format, as much as we could do on television. And then the story time segments, the Let's Share a Story, which focused, of course, primarily on comprehension and building vocabulary and building background or content knowledge, where we always strive to make sure that we were representing the diversity of New York City in terms of the texts that were read, the readers themselves, and that it was as culturally relevant and sustaining as possible. Janice, do you want to talk about the research, and I'll try and find this link?
Sure. So the research study that I talked about was conducted by Rachman et al. I'm not sure if we can share that whole report, but if we can, I will definitely share it with Jen, and then she can send the link out. But we can definitely share some highlights, especially from our survey findings, if that would be helpful for people.
Yeah, I think, one of the sort of the next section of questions I wanted to ask was, how you all made adjustments as you were going along. I know Jillian and Susan, you talked a little bit about the activation with educators and sort of that professional learning that really was the next step of, you made the show and then you had to really explore how educators could apply that either in the classroom or as supplemental supports in many cases. So don't know if you want to talk about that for a moment, and then maybe Janice, you can talk a little bit more about sort of some of the research you got back and thinking about adaptations you've made as you're sort of moving toward the next part of the phase of the program. So Jillian and Susan, you want to talk about, sorry, I'm like whizzing back and forth between columns on my screen. So yeah.
I think it's been really interesting to hear. Yeah, we've just gotten better at making the show, partly. No one had ever made a show, none of us had ever made a show like this before. And so, we tried things and got better over time. But I think that we've also been, we've been very intentional about having the coaches actually watch segments from previous episodes, because we're still making it, and we've been making it over a long period of time. So we've been watching segments, discussing them, kind of dissecting them and saying, oh, they missed an opportunity to say this, or this teacher keeps saying letter when she should be saying sound. Could we just improve that little piece of it? And so we've really been honing down on it. I don't know if you have anything to add there, Susan.
Yes, it's been a real opportunity for us to systematize the language and the vocabulary that we want our teachers to use around the practices. So we're developing that consistency. And I think, again, we have really worked to be geographically represented with our coaches and our teachers. So everyone's hearing the same message and they're delivering that same message. And again, they're so intentional in reviewing and preparing that it's been very, very successful and positively received.
Great. And Janice, do you want to talk a little bit about sort of what you learned from your survey and some adaptations you've been making?
Yeah, so one of the things we found is that parents were really using this as a way to as a bridge to help them do different educational activities with their kids, and really liked watching the episodes as well as segments. And so based on that, we've decided to make our Let's Learn platform just easier to use and more searchable. So if people are just interested in looking at read alouds, they could just find those, or if, specific topic areas they're looking for, because we realized that this is being used by a lot of different people, from educators to grandparents to parents. And so we want to make it as accessible as possible. The other feedback that we heard is that some families were saying that some of the segments felt a little too long. So we've been thinking about maybe varying the length. I mean, as it is now, a lot of the segments are between 10 and 13 minutes. And we do have some shorter segments that we put in there, some art segments and other things, but we're taking those suggestions to heart as well. But one of the things I wanted to add, we're also looking at different creative ways to get the word out. And in New York City, we have a really strong network of parent coordinators that are located in every school. And so we've been doing a lot of work with our parent coordinators at the schools to get the word out, because they are in constant contact with their families. And so when a lot of times when the parent coordinators say something like, watch the show, they do. And so we found that that's been a really beneficial collaboration working with the parent coordinators. Andrew, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
No, I think that covers it. I think as we've come back to in-person instruction, we actually don't have remote instruction in New York City at the moment. Technically, we don't. And so we've had to sort of walk a balance beam of wanting the resource out there, but making sure we're still encouraging in-person instruction, or not trying to take away from in-person, not trying to make families less not comfortable, if you will, with going back to buildings.
Yeah, and I think, we talked about this as we were pre-meeting, and one of the things that came up was sort of navigating that use case back into the classroom, and the role that public media content has played often really is as a supplemental type of resource that can either be plugged into a larger classroom experience, or might be something that could be passed on to a parent or used, in an after school sort of supplemental learning opportunity. I don't know if anyone wants to talk a little bit about sort of how they're looking at their content in that way through as sort of the additional use cases for supplemental learning. Jillian, you're nodding, so I'm gonna go to you.
Yes, and I mean, I think that Andrew shared a list that was very similar to ours in terms of how we're thinking about it. And I think that now we're really, as I mentioned, we've got those 6 coordinators who are working with teachers and hearing about the ways that they're using it in a classroom, whether it be, because all of our materials, all of our episodes also have an activity sheet that goes along with them. And so that has been a really like magic combination of the video plus the check for understanding and that activity sheet. So we've seen them used in classrooms. So teachers have used like clips in a classroom. They've used them for they've used it as a sub plan. That's actually been a pretty popular option, is to say, hey, this is what I was going to cover, and so this way I know exactly how it was delivered if it was a video that you can use for your sub. And also to send home as work with students who are quarantined or who have extended absences. But I think the biggest thing that parents or that teachers are saying is that they want to use it for family engagement. And they really are excited about, we've also been talking about how do we shorten our segments, because the teachers are very excited about the opportunity to say, to send home a 10-minute video or an 8-minute video and say, just sit down and watch this with your child, to help to really intentionally start to build that common vocabulary, help the parents understand exactly what's being taught so that they can reinforce it. So I think that's kind of the next thing that we want to encourage, and also try and test and see if that's effective.
We've had the same thing with and it was completely by just accident. My son's teacher didn't know where I worked or anything. I didn't share this with them, but then she shared with parents, hey, watch this video. And it was from Rise and Shine. It was one of our literacy videos. So what she asked parents to do was watch and then discuss with their child at home. So she used it both to reinforce the lesson that she had gone over that day on character traits, and then also for family engagement.
Okay, we're sort of reaching our last 15 minutes. So I wanted to shift the conversation to, that so that the folks who are in the audience can reflect a little bit about sort of what public media and education partners bring to the table. So for those of you in public media, if you have any thoughts about, for the folks tuning in who are not in public media, are there specific things that are useful for them to know, or questions that they might ask, or ways to open the conversation that might be helpful to help them really understand the shape of what a partnership with your organization might be? See, Janice is off mute, so that says to me she's ready to answer.
I can start. I think one of the reasons why all these programs work is because PBS is a trusted brand. and families trust that it will provide good educational content in an entertaining way. And I think that is the foundation for why all of this. And I think that's why the New York City Department of Education reached out to us too, because we're a trusted brand and they know we are respected as an educational television station and as a television source. And I think that's true for all of us. And I think that is the key to the success of all these programs.
And I would really encourage, we do have that long-standing relationship with our Department of Ed for over a decade, is to really reach out to your Department of Ed and explain, the way that we are able to produce engaging material. We understand it's not commercialized. We understand, you have someone on staff or you get the people involved to cover the standards, but a lot of Department of Eds, they're overwhelmed with COVID and all the things that they are. So if you can offer them a solution that's holistic, that you said, we'll take care of it. We'll cover all of these things and we'll do it with the people that we get involved and the staff that we add, they will be interested. If it's going to be another project where they have to put a lot of effort, then it's hard to decide which ones you'll do, right? Because you can't do it all. So, really coming to them with that full plan of how you will cover the standards, how you will make it engaging, and that it's accessible to everyone. It covers that equitable, access to education. It's a conversation they want to hear. And so, I would just encourage and let them know how you're going to do it. And so I think that we actually started with professional development, and then the students on TV came second. So, we went a different route, but as long as we have a solution for them that is really thoughtful, I think that a lot of them would be on board. So I would just say to really make, reach out to them, especially now, because a lot of the COVID funding and things like that, they need to get a lot of stuff done with those funds that they got.
And I was just going to add, I think this kind of collaboration really plays to each organization's strengths. So we were able to add guidance on how to create a good, engaging TV show and provide guidance to the educators in terms of filming from home. And then the Department of Education was able to align everything to standards. And so it really was a nice marriage where everyone worked to their strengths.
Yeah, I would just add, and there have been a couple comments in the chat about using other open educational resources and using other content. And I think all three of our examples, these didn't have the shows themselves didn't have a lot of pre-produced content in them. But I think that there are a lot of ways into this door to work with your local public media station. And, we air a ton of content. We actually have a 10 minutes at the end of every hour of our educational programs where we're airing pieces from museums and libraries and zoos. And, we're able to pull together a bunch of pieces similar to what WNET does with Camp TV, where they have all this great educational content that comes from partners. So when it comes to educational partners, I would encourage you to reach out and think outside the box and think about also, what is it that you have and what's your goal for it? So, do you have existing video that's really great and you're wondering how it might, incorporate into a show? Or is it, we've got this great, this great message or some, an event that we want to capture, or a virtual field trip that we could, help produce and, do as a live event. There are a lot of different ways that I think we can collaborate and get creative. And that's been what's really fun about this.
I think that's a great point, Jillian, that these are all rather large projects, but I know, and these all really were focused initially on broadcast and sort of standard TV lengths. But I know across the public television system, there's been a lot of work over the last year around capturing educational content that's much shorter, much more discreet, and also delivered digitally, as well as through broadcast, either interstitials, what we call smaller pieces of content that we air in the broadcast, or just as streamed video. A lot of stations have been doing work with local partners around virtual field trips
or specific lessons that are around local historical sites or local environmental features, all sorts of things that really relate to local curriculum that could be delivered virtually or via broadcast through that combination of educational expertise at the site or in that organization and the production experience and sort of narrative building experience that public media has. So that's a great point, that not everything has to be an entire series or a huge project. A lot of times small projects can make a big difference as well. So thank you for that. Let's see, I want to make sure that we cover in through the questions that we had queued up. We do have a couple questions here. One, I'm not sure if anyone feels like they can answer, but I'll go ahead and throw it out, which is any ways that any of you have seen remote learning, this type of remote learning supporting children in traumatic experiences. I know some of our stations have been doing a lot of work around ACEs, but I wasn't sure if any of you have specifically linked remote learning in that.
We did segments called Let's Be Mindful that were done by social workers throughout the system, and not present in every episode, not because of that we didn't want to, just finding folks who could do this filming at home and all of the other pieces. But we felt important that as much as we could to include those for all the reasons we would think of, just what we all went through and are still going through because the pandemic is not over.
We had some social emotional segments too, and then kind of a separate project, but we recently had a online professional development course for teachers on trauma-informed classrooms and ACEs.
Yeah, I think similarly, and again, that was one of the biggest things that we heard from educators, is that they wanted more social emotional resources, and their number one concern about kids who were at home was, are they okay? And so our first 4 episodes, really our first 16 episodes, 4 per grade, were all SEL on Read, Write, Roar. And then we also had interstitial segments that were called mindful practices, which were little breathing techniques and songs aimed at little kids.
Yeah, I know as we've had conversations over the past year or so around, where should we focus efforts to support learning through the pandemic, the focus has always been really those 3 core elements, which is social emotional learning, literacy, and math. And that those core pieces of educational content are sort of what almost everyone points to as the propeller, like the propellant for the rest of learning. You can really help bolster those areas. And so the 3 of you, we chose literacy here because this is the campaign for grade level reading. But certainly, as you've seen, you all illustrated in your projects, there's linkages to content in other areas, math, science, arts, those kinds of things. There was a question here too about, is this curriculum ever delivered in person by a PBS station? I can answer a little bit about some of what PBS does, but Janice, if you look like you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, so it's asking about the Let's Learn curriculum. So we definitely know that teachers are using it in person in their classes, but we as our PBS station, we're still working from our home. So we haven't been doing anything in person. We've done remote things, but we have not been delivering anything in person. I think it would be great if we went into a classroom and showed Let's Learn and got feedback, but we haven't been doing that. And for the study that Rockman et al. Did, they assigned 3 episodes for families to watch, and then the families provided survey responses and then interviews with the researchers. So that's how we got the feedback. So we do know the families were co-viewing together, but we were not there. But I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, and I know that you mentioned that the content has been fed into learning media. And so for those of you on the session here who are not in public media, PBS Learning Media, pbslearningmedia.org, is a resource for classroom content, lesson plans, interactives, all manner of material that educators can use for classroom learning. And most of the content there, well more than half, is contributed by PBS member stations like these three here, and the projects that they do in their local markets or the content that they develop locally. And so a lot of that is designed, I mean, it is all designed for use in classrooms. And then beyond that, PBS member stations do sometimes do educational educational activities at their stations, but more frequently are working with partners to execute educational events in community, because public television stations aren't always located right where people live. And so we're often working with community partners to bring those experiences directly to children, families, through libraries, community centers, housing authorities, those kinds of things as well. So we have about 5 minutes left. Does anyone have any sort of last parting thoughts for our group before we sign off today? See, I sprung this on everyone, so no one wants to jump in first.
I'll start. I just want to say I'm really inspired by the work of my colleagues here, that it feels like we're all kind of going in similar directions, trying to solve similar problems. And I'm just very inspired by what I've heard today.
I was just going to add, it's been a labor of love. I didn't expect to be involved in television in any way. I have an entire domain-specific vocabulary bank to draw upon. When you said interstitials, Jen, I immediately smiled because I feel like that's a new word I have come to know well, and bumpers, and I could rattle off some more. But it just felt like the most important thing at the time when the shutdown happened, and in thinking about our little ones, how could they access remote learning at that age, if they even had a device, let alone no devices, no connectivity. I think it's something amazing that's happened here and across the country, and how we all sort of came to it relatively independently, I think is amazing too. And really says something about PBS and what we knew could happen.
I'm going to add to that and just say it's amazing how collectively across our nation we have supported our educators and our children, and the fact that they're in our hearts, and we've done this through partnerships that we never thought would take place. We have moved from education to instruction across our nation, which I think is pretty special.
And it's been amazingly rewarding for us, and especially in the education department here, to do something that matters. You know, we did teacher development, and we always said, you know, we can do some instruction for students. And the great thing is we really respect and honor what the teachers do. And our goal is to help them and, you know, honor them in what they're doing, which is more difficult, and especially during COVID. So it's been so exciting for us, and we're just, you know, ready for the next phase of it and what we do next.
Great. Well, with that, I think we have 3 minutes left. I don't know, Sarah, if you have any parting words, or Sierra, who's hiding behind the grade level reading tile there.
I don't have any parting words other than a huge thank you to all of you. This has been such an amazing session, and I hope you all saw some of the amazing feedback that you got from folks in the chat box. They say that necessity is the mother of invention, and the pandemic definitely made this necessary. But wow, what a great invention you all have created in finding these new ways to come together, learning these new words like interstitial. I also did not know that before the pandemic, but through the sessions that we've hosted featuring the work of PBS, I have also developed a new vocabulary. So special thank you to Jennifer English for planning conceiving, leading, and moderating this session, but also huge thanks to all of our panelists, to Sanji Kumparas and Elizabeth Rollins from Arkansas, from Andrew Fletcher and Janice Fould in New York, and to Jillian Green Gainsley and Susan Townsend in Michigan. It's just wonderful to see all of these different examples of this work and these partnerships happening across the country. So thank you so much for joining us. I'd also like to say thank you to everyone who logged in for today's conversation and invite you to tune back in next week. We're bringing back to the screen the schedule of events that we have planned in the coming weeks. We'll have another Funder to Funder conversation next Tuesday, October 19th in the 12:30 p.m. time slot, which will be featuring another invention that has emerged through the pandemic, a partnership between foundations, the Overdeck Family Foundation and the New Jersey Pandemic Relief Fund, together with the College of New Jersey and Boys and Girls Clubs in New Jersey, to create and embed a high dosage tutoring program that achieved really great results in summer programs across the state this past summer. And it was so well, such great impact that they're continuing it during the school year and after school programs this year. And so there'll be some funders and other partners from across the country sharing lessons learned about how they are advancing and embedding high dosage tutoring into work with young children to help advance equitable learning recovery. Later in the afternoon next week, we'll have a session exploring some strategies around addressing some of the teacher staffing challenges that many school districts are facing, with Jill Violette and Amanda Von Moos of Substantial Classrooms and Jeremy Anderson of Education Commission of the States. And then we're going to have another session the following week, October 26th, exploring co-generational strategies, so ways that we can leverage the unique assets of older and younger change makers to help accelerate learning. And then we'll have another double header the following week to kick off the month of November. I hope you'll join us. I've posted the links to register for all of these sessions in the chat box. So I hope everyone will continue to tune in for more GLR Learning Tuesday sessions. But again, a huge thank you to our panel. This has been a really great session. So thank you all, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.